Okay, hi everybody. Good morning. Uh,
Morning.
let's just we're just going to finish Sif Dalid today, and what we're talking about is a person who makes a commitment to an oni, to a poor person. So yesterday we tried to quantify what exactly is a poor person, and the bottom line is that if you pledge to give something to a poor person, that becomes like a neder, because it's the mitzvah of tzedakah. And when you pledge to do a mitzvah, it now becomes a binding obligation, regardless of the level of reliance that the recipient has. There's now an obligation between you and Hashem for you to fulfill your mitzvah. And the Rav Shulchan Aruch takes that even further. He says, "Va'afilu gomar belibo," which is the last part of this sif. He says, even if a person made a mental commitment, litain, to give a certain amount for tzedakah, tzarech l'kayim machashavto kemoshi yizboyer behilchos tzedakah. He has an obligation to fulfill his mental commitment, as will be explained in Hilchos tzedakah. And as we mentioned briefly, and I want to go a little bit more into that today, that when a person makes a mental commitment to give tzedakah, it's as if a person makes a mental commitment to donate something to hektish. And when it comes to hektish, our Chazal teach us, what's the language? Diburo behektish kimisiraso laheja. That your speech, when it comes to hektish, is as if you've already made a binding commitment and have already given over to a human being. So it's almost as if a kinyan was made when you make a dibur. But in addition to that, when it comes to hektish, it's also as if a mental commitment is tantamount to a verbal commitment as well. So strong is the attitude of hektish. But we have to quantify that, and we'll look at how far that extends. Let's first look at the Imrei Yaakov commentary. Gomar belibo. Wrote Salomar, what it means that when it says that you completed an idea mentally, means the hechlit belibo. You made a decision in your mind, meaning you said decisively to yourself, I'm going to give $100 to this tzedakah. Avol masha matzui sha'over belibo eza machshava ba'alma im lo hechlit v'gomar lo nischayev. But let's say you have a passing thought. I get passing thoughts all the time. My problem is trying to get a thought that's not passing, that sticks, right? I think that's true with so many of us, right? So if you just have a passing thought of I should really give to this thing. I should, and this happens to us all the time. And your mind plays tricks on you. Did I say I was going to give to this tzedakah? It has to be something where decisively you mentally committed yourself. But, and this is true with amounts as well. Let's say you say, I'm definitely going to give to this tzedakah drive. And you're thinking in your mind how much I should give. I should give. All right, so they're doing a matching campaign, and every dollar that I give is equal to another $3. So if I give $100, that's $400. If I give $125, that's $500. Wow. Maybe I should give $120. So those kinds of maybe what I should give is not a mental commitment. The mental commitment has to be much more decisive. It has to be that okay, this is it. I'm gonna do this, and right after I finish what I'm doing, I'm gonna go to the computer and take care of it. Okay. Next, l'kayim machashavto, and you have to fulfill your thoughts. Ve'ein sarech amira, therefore speech is not vital. Ela di'im omar shechoshav mechayvin osu l'kayim machashavto. So if a person informs his rabbi or his posek that he has had this mental commitment, he's had this thought, then the psak din will be you are obligated to fulfill that commitment. And based on what we've just said, in kosav chek litzdaka, Avshalom misaro adayin, mikol makam asur lo lihischaret. Let's say a guy writes a check to tzedakah, which is not so common anymore because we're just going online. But we'll talk about that in a second. Let's say a person writes a check to tzedakah and he hasn't had a chance to drop it off yet. And then for whatever reason, he decides, you know what? I'd rather not do that, give that check in the end. It's usher for him to go back on that check. Why? Because there was a mental commitment to give. Because if you went to the extent of writing a check, then that means you mentally committed to give that amount. So therefore, you can't go back on it. Ulam al yedei she'elas chacham nira de'efshar lahatir kidleil sof divrei maslo shenasa ayin sham. But if you want to get a hataras nadarim, or if you want to go to a posek and say, I'd like you to annul this, so to speak, this vow that I made mentally by writing this check, then there is a method of annulment, but it has to be done formally. It can't just be that you independently decide. It has to be annulled for you. Okay. All right. So I just want to take a look at the biurim on this whole concept of mental commitments. And we're not going to see the whole piece, but the biurim over here tries to quantify how far this extends, as far as mitzvahs in general, making mental commitments to do things. How far does it go? And also, even verbal commitments, do they extend to other things as well? We know that when a person makes a mental commitment, remember we went back and saw all the way back in Sif Aleph, it says V'dover emes bilvavo. A person should always be truthful in his heart. And we saw that story about Reb Safra, who was in the middle of reciting Kriya Shema when a customer came to purchase something from him and kept offering him a higher price, thinking that Reb Safra's silence was a ploy to get him to go higher in the price, when in reality he was just reciting Kriya Shema. So when Reb Safra completed his Kriya Shema, what did he tell the person? He said, I already had in mind that I was going to accept X, so even though you've offered me X plus Y, just give me X. Now, as we pointed out, that's a midas chasidus. That's an act of piety. It is not halachically imperative. But here we're saying that when it comes to tzedakah, it is halachically imperative because it has the form of a neder So let's take a look and see how far this goes when it comes to the performance of other mitzvot. So he says, V'yesh la'ayin ma hadin b'shar mitzvot sha'adam gomer b'libo l'kayim v'lo hotzi zeh b'fiv. We have to think about what will be the din with other kinds of mitzvahs, where a person makes a mental commitment to fulfill a mitzvah, v'lo hotzi zeh b'fiv, and he didn't say it verbally. And he didn't say, so there was no, when you make a verbal commitment to do a mitzvah, so then we know that you're obligated to do that. Now, we learned that from the previous sif. If you remember, we went back. Let's go back. It was in Sif Bays. One second. Yeah, we said that if there's a mitzvah involved, right? If there's a mitzvah involved in your commitment, then you have to fulfill your commitment because you've committed yourself in the form of a neder to do a mitzvah for Hashem. So it's not just in the realm of tzedakah, it's in the realm of any mitzvah that you commit yourself to do verbally. It becomes like a neder and you have to fulfill that obligation that you've made to Hashem. So for the example that we're going to see is like this. What if a person says, I'm going to learn a certain amount of Torah, or I'm going to get up every morning for the next month, and I'm going to say an extra paragraph of Tehillim. So if you make a verbal commitment to do that, so then you're halachically obligated to follow through on that commitment. What about if you think about it? So let's take a look. Let's take a look. He says, Ha'im hu mechuyev l'kayim machshavto. He says, when it comes to other mitzvahs, that a person makes a mental commitment only, we see when it comes to tzedakah, you have to fulfill your commitment. But does that extend to other mitzvahs as well? Dihinei b'shavuos chavvav amid beis isa. Take a look at the Gemara in Shavuos. He says, what does the Gemara say? Amar Shmuel, Gomar belibo tzarch shiyotzi bisfasav shenemar levatei bisfasayim. There, Shmuel is talking about the laws of Shavuot, taking vows and oaths in general. He says if a person had made a mental commitment, he's not obligated until he actually verbalizes that commitment. Uparchinan mibraisa degam degomar belibo mischayiv kidichsiv kol nediv leiv. And the Gemara challenges that, and it says, but wait a minute. When it comes to the laws of donating to the Mishkan, the Torah says kol nediv leiv. Anyone who makes a commitment, even in their heart, is obligated to give. Why then is it necessary to verbalize a mitzvah commitment? Shouldn't mental commitment suffice? So the Gemara in Shavuos answers the question very simply. There are only two places in the Torah where the Torah talks about an nediv leiv, a person who makes a mental commitment. One is when it comes to donations to the Mishkan, and the other one is when it comes to donation, what you commit yourself when you commit yourself to give truma to a kohen. That if you think mentally, I'm going to give it to that specific kohen, you have to follow through on that commitment. V'chein nifsak b'shulchan aruch yoredeya siman reish yod sif aleph de'ein haneder chal ad sheyotzi b'svasav. And this is how we paskin in Yoredeya when we talk about the laws of nedarim, that a neder is only legally binding on a person when he makes a verbal commitment and not when he makes a mental commitment alone. Umi pashtos hasugya shamashma, b'chol davar sheba'olam, afilu dvar mitzvah, gam kein lo chal b'machshava. And so the simple import is that this is true not only when you make a mental commitment to go shopping, or to, but even when you make a mental commitment to do any kind of mitzvah. Any mental commitment is not sufficient to make you legally binding because it's not specifically tzedakah. Sharei truma v'kodshim heim dvar mitzvah v'afal pichein in malamdin. He says because both truma and hektish both are mitzvos, but they are localized to those two mitzvahs, and you can't apply it to other cases. That's what the Gemara says. The dafka bahem gilsa haTorah shehem chalim b'machshava. It is only in those two instances where the Torah says that a mental commitment is legally binding, avalo bishar dvarim af shehi mitzvah, but not with other things where a mitzvah is involved. So it would seem, therefore, that any other mitzvah other than committing to hektish or to committing to give someone truma, a mental commitment doesn't apply. Ulam lagabe tzedakah matzinu shenechelaku bazeh haposkim. But when it comes to regular tzedakah, which is not for hektish, we see that there's a machlokus in the poskim. The das harash b'tshuva klal yud gimel degam tzedakah lo chal al yedei machshava uchenemuchach misugi deshvuas hanal. On the one hand, we have the Rush, who's a Rishon Rabbeinu Asher, who is of the opinion that a mental commitment for tzedakah is not legally binding. On the other hand, we have the Mordechai that is quoted by the Beit Yosef in the Tur Shulchan Aruch, who says, "Pasak b'tshuvas hagon shehagomer belibo litein tzedakah chayiv ki lo hotzi b'fid." The Mordechai writes, quoting one of the Gaonim, that if a person makes a mental commitment to give tzedakah, he is obligated, as if he had verbalized it. So you see already that there's a machlokus in the Rishonim between the Rush and the Mordechai as to whether a mental commitment legally binds you to give tzedakah. Now the question, of course, is how can the Mordechai say that a mental commitment legally binds you to tzedakah if the Gemara in Shavua says explicitly that mental commitments are only legally binding in two instances, one for hektish and one for truma, but it doesn't say tzedakah in general. Ve'afal de beper gimel de shvuos ka'amar de truma v'kadshim shnei ksuvim haboim kechad ve'in melamdin pirish Rashi b'tshuva that tzedakah kinedar munadavos damya. So the answer is that Rashi had explained in a responsum that all tzedakah is tantamount to making a kind of neder. Hilchos gomar belibo litain tzedakah chayv kilo hotzi b'fivakan l'shono. And therefore Rashi says, like the Mordechai, that when you make a mental commitment to give tzedakah, you are obligated as if you had said it verbally. Ub'shulchan aruch sham siman reish nun ches if you gimel b'Ramah hevi shtei hadeos. The Ramah brings both opinions, the opinion of the Rosh and the opinion of the Mordechai and Rashi. The Kosav al Zeh HaRamah de ha'ikir hu kedas ha'machmirim. And the Ramah writes that we primarily paskin like the machmirim, like the more stringent opinion, that for all tzedakah, a mental commitment is tantamount to a verbal pledge. Va'ayin sham bigra, shekasav mishum de tzedakah habi kekadjem. And the Vilna Gaon explains, and he says that tzedakah is like a pledge to the Beis HaMikdash. Why is that? Because all tzedakah ultimately is a gift to God. I'm not just giving it to the poor person, I'm giving it to God because God says, I want you to give your money to the poor in the same way that you would give money to the construction of the temple. And as a result, when you make a mental commitment to give tzedakah, it's tantamount to making a mental commitment to donate to the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash. Al kol panim b'shar dvar mitzvah mashma delukuli alma lo nischayev al yedei machshava. Okay, but that doesn't really answer my question, says the Biurim, says Rav Stern, because what I'm dealing with is, what if you make a mental pledge for something that's other than tzedakah? So, for example, you make a pledge, I'm going to get up every morning and learn, or I'm going to daven extra. He says, Ach matzinu od ba'orachayim siman tav kuf samach be'esifav. Din yirher belibo shum makabel tainus lamachar, dahavi kabbalah, afshalah hotzi b'fid. So let's look at another example. It's brought down in Orachayim, in the laws of fasting, in siman tav kuf samach be'es, that if a person had a mental thought, a mental commitment the night before that he's going to fast the next day, then a mental thought of fasting is tantamount to a verbal commitment, and therefore he's halachically obligated to fast the following day. So based on that, it would seem that other kinds of mitzvah commitments in one's mind is tantamount to speech. Aval be'emes deleka misham raya, but I can deflect that as well. Tikvar herich bozeh hataz sham sifkat and ches because of the shiny tainus duhu nechshav kekadshim. Because the Taz writes that fasting is also like a donation to Kadshim, to the Beis HaMikdash. Why? The hatainus hu b'makom karban shehu makriv gufo lashamayim v'hu adif afilu mitzdaka. Because in certain respects, fasting for God is even better on a certain level than giving tzedakah. Why? Because what you're doing is that you're donating your body to heaven. It's almost like you're making yourself into a korban. When you fast, what we essentially say, and you may know this from Tefillah Zaka, that we say there's a line in there which says that through the fasting and the loss of body mass that I will incur through this fasting over Yom Kippur, may that loss of body mass be as if I had donated that portion of my body and placed it on the altar and offered it before you, Hashem. That's essentially what fasting is. V'chein kasav sham ha'el yarabah sivkat and hay, v'chein ha'korban asanel, and v'chein kasav sham ha'gura, u'mashmos divreim the b'shnei dvarim hanal, d'hainu tzedakah v'tainis, b'zeh yesh l'machshava din dibur. And therefore it seems from what we've just stated is that only when it comes to A, tzedakah, and B, fasting, that those are tantamount to temple donations, and therefore mental commitments are binding. The dinam kehekdesh. And then he says, see the Mishnah Brura at this place and at that place. Od yesh lahar midivrei hashas nedarim ches amad aleph, I would also like to bring another point, that there's a Gemara in Maseches Nedarim that says, "The Ha'omer Ashkim ve'eshna perek zeh, the neder gadol nadar lelokei Yisrael." That if a person verbalized the following sentence, he said, "Tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up early and I'm going to study this chapter of Mishnah." Okay, if a person makes that verbal commitment, then he has made a neder, even though he hasn't said it in the language of neder, but he just said, "I'm going to do this." Turns to his wife before he goes to bed and he says, "Honey, I'm setting my alarm clock. I'm waking up at 6 o'clock so that I can go to the Choshen Mishpat shir at 6:30. So don't let me sleep in. Kick me if I don't hear the alarm," right? And he tells that to his wife, and then he wants to sleep in. So the halach is he can't. He's not allowed. Halachically, he's not permitted to sleep in because he's already made this commitment. Says the Gemara that it has the power of a neder. V'nifsak b'shulchan aruch yoredei siman reishud gimel sif gimel b'zelu shana. The Shulchan Aruch actually says this. It says, "Ha'omer eshna perek zeh havikilu nader lasei tzedakah," that if a person said, "I'm going to study this chapter," it's as if he made a neder to give charity. The cause of Sham Harama v'hashach duhu adin kishaomer laso shar mitzvah dino kaomer eshna perek zeh v'havi neder akam l'shana. And similarly, anytime a person makes a verbal pledge that he's going to do a mitzvah, it's as if he made a neder, and therefore he's halachically obligated to follow through. Umashma, but it seems like from that language, the dafka heicha da'amr lahedje v'hotzi b'sfasav havi neder. But it seems like what they're all saying is that you have to at least verbalize it in order for it to have the power of a neder. And he says in the bracket, v'hachidushu da'af shelo havi b'lash neder mikol makom b'dvar mitzvah chal u'chadkastu sham harishonim nedarim daf zayin chesu l'kaman. And the whole chiddush of this halacha is that even though you didn't say the word, "I take a vow," I take a neder that I'm going to wake up early and study, but if you just said, "I'm going to wake up tomorrow and study this additional study," that in itself, because it's a mitzvah, and you said you were going to do it, you are legally obligated to do it as if you made a neder. Va'afta lashon hashulchan aruch dahavi ki'ilu nader lasei tzedakah. Umekaru Arash Vaharan, Vimkain Lachara Muchach Danu Mashvin Sharmitzis Litzdaka, Uvitzdakari Kamlan Lahachmer de Gamba Machshavan is Chayev, Vimkain Gamba Sharmitzis Shalom Arkain. He says, even though the language over there implies that pledging to do any other mitzvah is like pledging to give tzedakah, and by tzedakah we know that mental obligations count, and so too you could make the argument here as well. Avalanias Daiti Yef Shalom Arkach. He says, but I don't think that's what they mean when they say that it's tantamount to a pledge to tzedakah. He says, because before we said, because we've just clarified from the Gemara that only when it comes to truma and kachim do we say that one's mental commitment is tantamount to a verbal commitment. And mishum davi shnei ksubim bo'em ke'echad ve'in melamdin, because the Torah says that only those two are the exception to the rule, and by everywhere else you have to make a verbal commitment. And only tzedakah and fasting are like a commitment to the Beis Hamikdash, but not all other mitzvahs. And therefore, my conclusion is that when it comes to making a mental commitment to do other mitzvahs, it is not legally binding. You have to actually verbalize it in order to be legally bound to a mitzvah. So if you just thought to yourself without turning over to your wife before you go to bed, you just thought to yourself that you're going to wake up in the morning and go to the shir, but then when the alarm goes off, you say, forget this. So then halachically, you're not legally bound to do it. It may be that from a moralistic point of view, you should push yourself because because of the issue of dover emes bilvavo, that a person should always speak the truth in his heart, like we learned before from Rav Safra, but nonetheless, there is no halachic obligation to do so. And he actually makes a point, I'm not going to go through the rest of it, but he makes an actual point of saying this over here. He says, Uh, he says, "V'chein mashma midivrei harav," and it seems that the Rav Shulchan Aruch also maintains the same thing. De le'inyan tzedakah kasav kan ditzarch lekayim machshavta u'mashma shezeh min adin. He says, because in Arsif, he said that when it comes to tzedakah, a mental commitment legally binds you to follow through. Ula elsif aleph kasav din gomer lasos eza tova lechaver yesh lo lekaima. And yet in Sif Aleph, he had said that if you had a mental commitment to yourself that you were going to do your friend a favor, you were going to do an act of chesed for your friend, you should fulfill it. You should fulfill it, not that you're obligated to fulfill it. But the implication is that it's only the moral thing to do, the ethical thing to do, right? Because a person should always speak truth in their heart, but it's above and beyond the legal halachic requirement. And even though when you said, I'm going to do my friend a favor, that's under the realm of the mitzvah, because there's a mitzvah of chesed, to do something nice to your friend, but it becomes clear from the language of the Rav Shulchan Aruch that that's not a halachic requirement, it's only a pious thing to do. And then only when it comes to actual tzedakah, which is to the poor, do we say that your mental commitment is like hektish. But with all other mitzvahs, with the only other exception being fasting, your mental commitment does not count. But perhaps we could deflect that proof from Sif Aleph, because when it comes to chesed, maybe there's not enough specificity in that mitzvah to make you legally bound when it comes to making a mental commitment. But you could theoretically argue that when you make a mental commitment on a more specific mitzvah, like tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and learn an extra parak of Mishnayos, maybe that, because of its greater specificity in your mind, would make you legally bound. He says, and therefore maybe chesed is a totally different genre, to the point where even if you made a verbal commitment that you're going to do something to your friend, it doesn't have the status of a neder. Ach al kol panim le'inyan nidon hanal b'chashav lasos mitzvah nira ha'ikar k'moshe kasafti delo achal alav achiyah. But in the final analysis, after all this back and forth, he says, it would seem to me clear based on the Gemara in Masechah Shavuos that if a person only had a mental commitment to do a mitzvah other than tzedakah and fasting, and then he would like to renege on that mental commitment, he has the halachic right to do so. Okay? Questions, comments?
Oh, one quick question. I presume the catch-all bli neder works, although it probably shouldn't be used every time you say something. But I mean, does that help with respect to these commitments if you back out?
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason why we advocate for people to say bli neder. It's a very good point, Paul. There are people who every time they say they're going to do something, they say bli neder because they wish to avoid this halachic commitment that they may find themselves becoming halachically committed. But remember, that when it comes to certain things, saying bli neder is not going to work. So, for example, if you had committed to an ani that you're going to give him tzedakah, I don't know if saying bli neder alone is going to help. Because number one, there's a sense of reliance. If you made a commitment to give that person a matana, even if he's not an ani, but you make a verbal commitment to another person, saying bli neder only absolves you from the bein adam lamakom, between your obligation to God to follow through on your verbal commitment. But if you make a commitment to someone and they have a sense of reliance, then there's a bein adam lachavero that may not be alleviated just because you said bli neder, right? Okay, so just keep that in mind. And
Rabbi,
yes, Eddie.
Just very quickly, is let's say you usually set your alarm for 6:30, but you specifically said it earlier for 6 o'clock because you want to listen to your shir. Is that enough of an action to obligate you?
Right. So that's what we've been studying now. So he says,
Right.
Rav Stern is of the opinion that unless you actually say, I'm going to be learning at 6:30, I'm going to go be listening to my shir at 6:30, you're not halachically bound to it.
Okay.
You're
So
not,
it has to be verbal, not just an action.
it has to be verbal, not just an action. That's right. That's right. Because, you could also interpret that the fact that you didn't verbalize it means I'll set my alarm. And if I wake up, I wake up, and I'll see how I'm feeling in the morning. If I'm really, really exhausted, I'll sleep in the extra half hour.
Rabbi, can we say it to ourselves? It's valid if we say it to ourselves, or we have to say it to somebody else?
No, even verbalizing it without anyone there is a verbal commitment, and it halachically binds you to do the mitzvah. So
basically, our lips are going to be our witnesses. Something like
right.
that.
That's right. That's kichol asher yetzei mipiv ya'aseh. The Torah says whatever comes out of your mouth, you must follow through on. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Okay. So
the tree falls in the forest, but even if there's no one there to hear it, it still makes a sound. Yes.
That's right. Good analogy. All right. So with that, let me wish you a good Shabbos, everyone. Any good and welfare for the week. We thank our sponsors for this week again, and may all the newcomers have an aliyah. Any good and welfare for the week?
No. Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.